Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here with Reality Check. Back with my old friend Ken. Ken is a scientist and he's developed a C60, that wonderful product that makes you healthy and wealthy and wise. And we're here today to discuss, well, what happened with the moon recently?
Oh yeah, that's the latest moon crashing.
Yeah.
It seems to be pretty bad. I think last year they sent five to the moon, and only one landed. The Chandra 3, the Indian Space Research Organization, which somehow I gave them some mathematical formulas to help them out there. And then this year they've had three landers, and two of them have crashed. The one's trying to land near the poles
Yeah.
primarily, and the other one, Blue Ghost, almost tipped over, but it had a very wide base. So unlike the other ones, which are very cylindrical. So
These
it's
are a lot, mostly private missions, right?
yeah, they're private missions. NASA can't do anything, so they're doing
Yeah.
that
Oh, they landed on the
public-private.
moon 6 times successfully, so.
Yeah, well, it was a long time ago, back when they had Germans.
I guess,
Remember?
yeah.
They lost those Germans. That's
Import
how.
those Germans, or you do the calculation right.
Yeah, that's right. That's what happens.
So, what's causing all these crashes? Is everybody just getting stupid, or what?
Well, was that a rhetorical question? Well, first off, if you want to land on a gravitational on a body, right?
Yeah.
Well, first you have to have a mathematical formulations, which actually can adapt to that body's geophysical structure. Like for instance, Newton's concept, he took like all the mass of the planet, the volume, and shrank it down into an infinitesimal point. And like you could do the same for the moon, and then you could calculate the gravity between them. But because a perfectly spherical field, mathematically wise, comes off of that tiny point, it doesn't really work for the oblate spheroid Earth because, kind of the Earth spins, and so it bulges out a little toward the equator, as it tends to happen to be. Well, it's appropriate to put the North and the pole, South Pole on the rotational axis, but it's, you can't get Newton's doesn't work there. My mathematical formulations knew they're three magnitudes better than Newton's. They're on ResearchGate if you want to look them up. Maybe we'll put a link in there. But there's another thing on the moon. It's like the Earth's an oblate spheroid because it spins, but the moon is gravity locked. And it always keeps the same face to us. And uh, and so it is what's called a prolate spheroid. And it actually kind of looks like an egg. Let's do that. It kind of looks like an egg. I mean, this is a great exaggeration, but if you were to look at the moon from the side, it looks a little bit like an egg. Of course, if you look at an egg, right, face up, like if I was looking at the moon, it looks pretty round, right? But in reality, the moon is slightly egg-shaped. And uh, and
We're
the
just
way
seeing the end of the egg.
exactly, we're just seeing the end, which looks round, but it's not really. It's actually kind of a little bit oval. Now, astronomers could see it with their telescopes. The average person with their eyes might not be able to pick that subtlety up. But and so when you do the moon is gravity locked. It keeps one rotation for one orbit, right? So the Earth is the primary function on the controlling the moon. So you have to put the poles different. You have to have like a near Earth pole, the point of the moon closest to the Earth. And this is true for every moon in the solar system. They're all gravity locked with their body. And then you'd have the far Earth pole on the far side of the moon, the point farthest from the Earth. And then you put your latitudes and longitudes on your little body. So there, that's it. But if you looked at the moon and you actually saw a map, that's kind of what it would look like. And the rim we see of the moon is actually the equator. And then, of course, there's the far. This is, of course, a great exaggeration, but still, it's the
So,
actual. Oops.
so what we're seeing is this
Yeah,
action.
that's all you. Yeah, that's all you. Well, it doesn't even move. It just sits there.
Oh no, it's turns. It's a moon
Yeah,
turns.
yeah, yeah. And so it's depending on yeah. So it's just yeah. So it's just that's all we see every time. And so it looks round, but it really isn't. And that first you have to redo the moon because when humans went to the moon, they said, "Oh no, let's just put a North Pole on it and a South Pole on it, just like the Earth." But that doesn't work because it doesn't correspond to the physical structure of the moon. And then you add my mathematical formulations, and you can actually land. What's really ironic is like the iSpace. I'll tell you the story. Anyway, it happened last year. Last year, iSpace crashed a space probe about this time. I don't know. No, it's about like in March, whatever. And I was doing some research on it and on why it did it. And it looks like they were just using Newtonian calculations. But I was going to help them out, maybe send them a letter. And I went into the computer and I realized they were just about 10 miles. Their headquarters was 10 miles from my house. It's a Japanese company. It's out at Centennial Airport. So I went down there to hand deliver them the mathematical formulations with a little introduction letter and talk to them a little bit. But they didn't really. They didn't really. I guess who am I, right? I don't have a PhD. I'm not piled higher and deeper, and I'm not a voice of authority. But while I was doing that research, I discovered that India was about to send Chandrayaan-3 to the moon and land, and we had actually contacts in the Indian military industrial complex, and so my friend contacted his friend, who contacted, we got to ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization, and they got my math, and lo and behold, they're the only one
Well,
last
the
year
only one that
that
landed.
landed successfully, and the other ones have my math. Well, I didn't bother with the American ones because they just ignore you completely, I know.
Are there any NASA images of this egg-shaped moon?
Yeah, there probably are if they take them from the side of the moon, if they put like an orbital and you look at the side. Because really what you're doing, if you were in orbit with the moon, right, and you just looked at it at the side, right, instead of, we just see it this way, but if you were in orbit with the moon, you could look at the side of the moon, you could actually, well, the astronomy instruments could see that the moon is actually a prolate
How come
spheroid.
we never heard this, like from NASA, that the moon is shaped like an egg?
Well, because well, I don't
And then
know.
how come they put the poles in the wrong place?
Well, because that's just the way humans do things. They just, it worked for the Earth,
Have they
let's do it.
fixed it?
No, of course not.
They're still saying that
No.
the top of the moon is the
Yeah.
North Pole and the bottom is.
Yeah, because they don't have the consciousness to understand
How
that,
could this be?
because
How can a major organization alive since 1958?
well, the whole human race though. They don't have, other than maybe the Indians doing their thing on the side, there's no proper, and this is true for every gravity locked planet or body in the solar system, all the moons of the solar system. And that's why they keep crashing. And so actually what it is the Earth, if you were to
How embarrassing.
yeah, if you actually look at the thing, gravity is much higher on the moon's equator, which is the rim we see, than it
Well,
is.
that would explain those anomalies that they found.
Yeah, exactly.
The gravity set, the gravity
Yeah,
increase.
well, the mass cost, that's true. What happens is if you have like, if they did the quote they call the South Pole, or the North Pole, which would be the upper equatorial construct and the lower equatorial area. That's what we call it, rather than the North and South Pole. And but what it is if gravity is higher, they have mathematical formulas. When you want to land your spacecraft, you want to come down so your vertical and horizontal speeds are exactly the same. Well, if gravity is higher and you got your radar altimeter, that means you're coming in faster, and you can adjust the vertical
You can't
function
adjust the
at the horizontal. So what happens is they always come in with a bit of the horizontal,
Yeah.
and then they tip over. And that's what happened to let's see, well, the Russians actually crashed theirs in the moon, but Innovative Machines sent one last year and it crashed. They sent one this year and it crashed. And then I think the Israelis sent one last year, but it might have got shot down by its alien base. And then
Don't let those Israelis on the moon.
yes, and so so it's just, and of course they sent one earlier. It was Innovative Machines came earlier. Then they did Blue Ghost, which actually landed, but it wasn't really going for the moon's quote north or south poles. And it kind of came down. It had a very wide base, so it could handle that. You could see it rocking forth back on the live feed, but the iSpace just went in and crashed into the moon because they can't calculate gravity. And I personally hand delivered the information, but I am not important enough, and my ideas don't mean enough.
Oh, you're a threat.
That's what. No, they don't even know that. See, they first have to have the consciousness to understand.
No,
that.
the mindset is don't ever let someone from the outside, because then that will prove that you're not as good as you are.
Oh well, and I was also the one responsible for the Phoenix lander working. And this is on Mars, and Mars is more oblate than the Earth. We're about 0.3%, Mars is 0.5%. So gravity is going to be a little bit higher at the poles than I went and looked, because they had the Mars Polar Lander, exactly the same platform as what the Phoenix lander was. It came first, and it was going to land in pretty much the same sort of latitude, not exactly the same longitude, different kind of spot. And it came and it crashed. And when I did, I says, why did it crash? So I went looking at it, and it looked like NASA was just doing like Newtonian mathematics, which doesn't work. You have to use the new gravitational mathematics. It's on ResearchGate. We'll put a link in. And
NASA doesn't know this.
And NASA doesn't know well. Well, some people know it. Like, you ever wonder why the Soyuz spacecraft takes 6 hours to get to the space station where it takes NASA 50? Yeah, and China has my math, and you might have noticed that they have a capacity to land on the moon.
They do.
That's right, but then you have to tell the Chinese once and they can figure it out. So yeah, but anyway, I went and looked, and it looked like JPL NASA was just using straight Newtonian gravitations for Mars, and of course, since the gravity was higher, Mars is a little different. It's got a bit of an atmosphere. So when they were sending that probe to Mars, what they did is there's a heat shield which slows it down a lot. And then when the heat shield gets to it slows it down enough that there's a parachute that comes on, and then that slows the Mars probe down even more. And then about 4 kilometers above the ground, it kicks in with the retro rockets to slow it down even more. And it was supposed to slow it down to about 10 meters above the ground, and then guidance control was going to stick in and land it. But if you got a 4 kilometer burn and you're, let's say, a 0.5% off on the gravity, you're not going to be 10 meters above the ground when the guidance control. You could be 100 meters, 200 meters. I'm not sure, what the angle came in, but so it obviously maybe either the thing ran out of fuel and it crashed, or it exceeded mission parameters and it couldn't handle it and it crashed. But anyway, I knew Dr. Peter Smith, and he was the head researcher director of the Phoenix lander. And I'd seen him at the Mars Society and stuff. So I typed him up a letter and sent it off to him with the information. And he said he couldn't believe JPL and NASA couldn't get the gravity right. But what he did on the mission,
Pretty unbelievable.
what he did on the mission, he changed it. So the very minute the parachute kicked off and the retro rockets went on, he made sure that the radar altimeter was turned on, and then the flight computer could guide the Phoenix lander down. And that's what
Has anybody landed on the moon, on Mars?
Oh yeah, no humans. Well, there's probably
No,
some
no, I
space.
mean,
Well, no, they did with some of that. Some of the flying saucers they built, they flew to the moon.
I
To
know
Mars,
that.
yeah.
I'm talking about the
But
standard
yeah, but the
story.
standard stuff. No, they just get probes, and they crash a lot of probes on Mars.
And the Mars rovers were parachuted in.
Yeah, they have a whole.
So they don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, see, they just can't calculate. I mean, supposedly humans are super advanced, but they can't even figure out how to map their own moon, let alone the moons of any moon in our solar system.
Even though we landed there 6 times.
Yeah, well, the good thing remember when Apollo 11 was coming down and Neil Armstrong had extra fuel? Well, that's because on an egg, if you had the prolate shape, there's going to be gravity is much lower because they landed like on the nearest point to the Earth, right? Pretty close to it. So gravity is much lower there, so you're going to use less fuel to get to the ground. But you have to know
they didn't know that.
They didn't know that. They still don't know it. It's ridiculous. And they can't even map. You go out there and look. You will not find any lunar maps anywhere available on the internet where they actually have the near Earth pole and the far Earth pole.
So this could be a full moon tonight. Is it going to be is it the North Pole or the South Pole that's facing?
No, we just get the near Earth pole faces us.
You
Yeah,
can't
the
see
north
the
is
north and south.
there's no north and south because
Just east and west.
the rim would be where the North Pole is, the South Pole and the rim, but that's actually the equator. When we see the rim of the moon is the equator, and then the point closest to us is the near Earth pole. We can't see the far Earth pole because it's on the other side, and always is because it's a gravity locked body. But and you know what? They'll ignore me. They'll keep sending spacecraft. They'll keep crashing, losing hundreds of millions of dollars. I think iSpace's stock crashed 30% after their lander failed. But some people like the Indians will listen to me. And they'll do the math because the Indians are good at math. They did the math. They said it worked. Hey, let's use it. They land on the moon successfully.
Well, they don't even know that the moon's egg-shaped. So, I mean, I've been to every NASA facility there is. I've talked to all the top scientists at NASA. This is 30 years ago now, but I still did it. No one ever mentioned any of this.
Well, it's quote known if you go into the scientific literature and read at the bottom, they know that the moon.
They're NASA.
Yeah, they should be. Yeah, they should realize, this is a great exaggeration. The actual egg shape of the moon is pretty minor, but it's big enough to crash all your spacecraft. So it's not really that minor. And if you don't actually put your gravitational mathematics to the actual shape of the body you're landing on, what do you know? You crash and crash and crash again. And I can communicate with these people, but it's just like, who am I? I have a master's in basic science or biogeochemistry, if you want to classify it, and I don't have a PhD in orbital dynamics, so I'm just nobody, and they ignore me. But they'll keep sending the spacecraft, and they'll keep crashing the spacecraft, and they'll keep sending more spacecraft, and they'll keep crashing those spacecraft. And maybe Elon even ignores me, so they'll send their their spacecraft is, and they'll crash it on the
And
moon.
there's no electromagnetic field, right?
No, it's got no magnetic field. See, on Mars and other things, you got a little bit of atmosphere to slow your stuff down on some of the horizontal stuff when it comes to it. But the moon has nothing. So if you don't get it exactly right, boom, you crash. And and oh well, oh well, it's just one of those weird things
What's your
that
feeling about that guy that died, um, Bruce sees all?
oh yeah, Bruce sees all. Well, Bruce was filming. He had was it a 22-inch uh a
High
refractor?
res.
Yeah, and it was a really good one. And he was filming all this kind of stuff going on the moon surface. I mean, but there's other people too, and the moon is very active. Objects coming off of it, objects
Oh,
flying into it,
amazing.
objects flying between the Earth and the moon. I didn't remember Jose Esmia.
Yep.
He was going to do
I knew Jose.
Yeah, he knew he was going to do a show called Moon Rising. Eventually, he did
Yeah,
it,
he did it. Yeah.
but the part he never put in is he worked with a guy kind of like Bruce, but not the same. And he had been filming with, I think it was a 22-inch reflector. He'd been filming the moon forever, and he had filmed like all these objects flying between the Earth and the moon,
Yeah.
like 60 kilometers across.
Yeah.
One even looked like a giant Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And it was just flying between the Earth and the moon. And there's lots of, you can go online and see all this stuff. And
All there.
it's ridiculous. Oh, there's no such thing as aliens, extraterrestrials. Yeah, here, I mean, you saw the one with the kind of the three tube looking things coming along the edge of the moon.
Yep.
These things are like 50 kilometers across, 80 kilometers long. I mean, three of them.
Clearly
yeah,
artificial.
yeah, exactly. And then they're telling us, oh, there's no such thing as aliens. Or I can't find any evidence that there are extraterrestrials. It's so insane. How stupid.
How many
How
videos
stupid
did
could
Bruce
people be?
have? Bruce must have had
Oh,
like
dozens.
500
Yeah,
videos that he
of
had.
stuff coming in, coming off,
Yeah.
flying over, doing everything, lights on the moon.
Buildings.
Yeah,
Buildings, tubes.
yeah,
It's like, what?
yeah. Things would appear and then they disappear. Big things. And so yeah, it's just like do we live on planet retard?
We do.
Okay, I think that's why we live on planet
Or
retard.
maybe it's planet lunatic.
Yeah, because oh no, it's right in front of your face. No such thing as extraterrestrials. No such thing as this. And they can't even calculate gravity on their closest terrestrial body. The human race has a problem.
Some dude in Montreal with a 22-inch telescope is seeing more than people that run Mount Palomar.
That's right. They just do well. Maybe they see stuff and they don't want to talk about it.
Well, that's
Because-
what Jacques Vallée said.
Yeah, that's exactly
He
what
was
they did.
working as an astronomer in Paris, and he saw a UFO and he reported it. Everybody told him to shut up.
See just how dishonest and corrupt the inherent structures of our society are. That the obvious can't be spoken. But then again, there's people in women's sports who are stealing all the medals. And which is another ridiculous thing. I mean, it's just absurdistan. Uh, it's just beyond. I mean, I just look at the current state of things and just the sheer idiocy of what's going on and
So who do you
incompetence.
think is up on the moon?
Well, I think it's a variety of different extraterrestrial species, and there's a lot of ruins up there. It looks like because that's when Jose did his one of them they had he did a movie. They did the Clementine missions came up
Yeah.
there, and then they hired a guy to do like all the airbrushing. And then you get the stuff. But when the guy did the airbrushing, he just brushed. So if it was a dome, he just brushed out the dome.
And you'd see the brush out.
Exactly. You see the profile. If it was a tower, you'd see the tower. And you could always just see it because everywhere else was distinct and crisp, except these areas were blurred out. Because he didn't know about, I guess, what do you have that blending. So,
He probably wanted you to see it.
oh, well, he could have just followed the letter of the
Yeah,
law. Maybe
yeah,
he did.
Most of these guys want you to know what's
Yeah.
going on.
Well, the lower level ones.
So the Clementine mission was pretty interesting. The Pentagon sent a mission. I think it took 15,000 images,
Yep.
and they got one particular image of the crater Aristarchus,
Which is always active.
which is really strange looking. Looks like it has a blue dome over the top of it, or it looks like an artist got in there and messed with it, but
Yeah.
like they couldn't quite hide everything that was there. And we know that Aristarchus is like the number one mention in the translunar phenomena report.
For lights and strange
that
mists.
astronomers
yeah.
have seen over the years all the stuff, and Aristarchus gets most of the attention on the list. And then Clementine in it must be the early 90s, photographs Aristarchus, and it just does not look right.
Well, one of the things they set up with NASA before anything came out The cameras they set up, all the NASA photographs go to a private company.
Oh, I know.
They go to a private company,
Oh, I know.
which then does the modification. Then it comes back to
Absolutely.
NASA because
I
if the
know
government
people
did it, they'd have to admit to it. But if it goes to a private company, a
yeah.
private company is not under Freedom of
I've
Information Act.
talked to airbrushers who are airbrush NASA photographs. They told me that they saw all sorts of stuff and they had to airbrush it all out. There is like really weird stuff on the moon. And so the question is they did what was it called? The mission to the moon where they photographed the moon before NASA, before Apollo.
Yeah,
I can't remember the name. Two times they went up
yeah.
there.
Clementine was one of them, and then there was
No, Clementine, this is way before
even that.
Apollo. This is
Yeah,
like
that was was it the
1966.
Rangers,
No, not the Rangers.
surveyors?
No, they're
No,
made by Boeing.
yeah, that was a
Anyway,
long time ago.
yeah,
That was
they
really
did
young.
that in like 66 and 67, and you can't find those images hardly at all right now. They're rotting away at NASA, but I've looked at them, and they must have had one hell of a slideshow for the Pentagon and the president after those missions because there was so much stuff on the moon that they saw, and I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good if you were going to study the Earth, it'd be a good place. And of course, one of the things they have, I think, who is that really famous remote viewer? And he went up north, and they saw
Oh,
the spacecraft filling up with water.
yeah,
Oh, I try to kick right at the tip of my tongue, but I can't say
not
it.
Pat Price.
No, it's the other
It's
one.
a
He worked with the guys down at
yes,
Princeton.
I know. Yeah,
Yeah,
he worked at Princeton. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, so Pat Price did too.
yeah,
Oh no, Stanford. I mean,
yeah. Stanford, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Stanford, yeah. Anyway,
Anyway, I know.
it'll come to us.
No,
But
he's the one that said there was bases on the moon.
yeah, and that's one of the things, yeah, because he remote viewed them. And the other thing that they had is they have there's a lot of reports of UFOs coming to Earth, like they'll go over reservoirs
Yeah.
and they'll pull water into their
They'll fill
spacecraft.
up.
Well, and what's another thing they had in the old space station, that one they put up, what was in the 70s, 80s, it was really Tom. They had outside, they had these like
Oh, Skylab.
Skylab, that's what it was, Skylab. And they had these strange aerogel collectors so that like dust would hit the aerogel and be captured without being destroyed. And when they took them off they've been out there for like years and years, right? They took them off, they put them inside, and then they took them back to the Earth to examine what kind of things. And what they found is huge amounts of Earth plankton.
Yep.
Earth plankton. Now, how does Earth plankton get into orbit? Except maybe some spacecraft is coming out of the ocean and it's going out and
I
leaving.
never thought of that.
Well, things drip off of it, right?
Yeah.
And some of them get, and so you get Earth's ocean plankton in orbit. Like obviously, Earth plankton getting in orbit, they don't have a little spacecraft to get them there. So, yeah, so that's obvious. So some things are coming out of our ocean and out of the
That's the
planet.
best explanation I've heard
Yeah,
of that.
yeah, because that's the only explanation, really. There's no way you're going to get plankton up into the orbital space. It's ridiculous.
So do
So.
you think we have a military base on the moon?
I think the Apollo 17. I think that was the last one.
Yeah.
Well, the last one they sent to the moon. They had
That they told us.
yeah, and when it was leaving, because ham radio operators could listen to everything, and there was a big transmission as the Apollo left the moon's gravity and went into the Earth's. There's a point there, and everybody on the ham operator said, "Do not return." Very loud, incredibly loud. Thousands of ham radio operators around the planet heard
I
it.
never heard that one.
Yeah, and so we've never been back, and that they admit to.
Well,
Yeah, so
the moon is, Isaac Asimov said the strangest thing in the solar system is the
Mhm.
moon.
yeah, it's there's a and there's they have there's obviously beings living on it and things crash flying out. I mean, Bruce sees all is not the only guy, but Bruce sees all stuff is still up there. I don't think they've scrubbed it off yet.
Well, I live in a dark sky area, so I'm thinking of buying one of those telescopes and doing a Bruce sees
Oh,
all.
they have amazing ones. They do automatic tracking, and you have the camera in the focus
They're
zone.
not very expensive anymore.
No,
They
they
used to be
aren't.
really expensive, but now they're down to like $5,000 for a
Yep.
telescope. So anyway, well, it's great having you on.
Yeah.
The moon is my favorite subject, and you have successfully calculated what the shape of the moon is. And I find it shocking that there's poles not where the poles belong. I find it shocking that NASA doesn't know any of this.
It's like, no, the whole planet. You can't find a correct map for the Earth's moon. Humans have not been able to figure that out yet.
Yeah, we've been there 6 times.
Yeah, they can't figure it out. But they can't figure out how to map it. And that's why they crash. They keep crashing and they'll keep crashing, and maybe someday they'll listen. But you know what? Don't hold your breath because your face will turn
All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. It's been fun, and I'll be back. I told you I was coming back, and I'm back.